Still warming up and waiting for people to show up. How streaming or casting LCS radio? Because I know the baseball vibes were hitting me hard when you were. I watch a lot of baseball and I listen to a lot of baseball. So when you said that you were like, oh yeah, we're trying to kind of go for kind of a baseball feel to it, I was like, I get that. I totally felt that.
It's good. They're going on like right now. I was tuning in earlier. We've got a good team over there. It's like a lot of like the people backing us like trust us, but also like really push for us to like do more and also enable us to like do things that we want. So it's been fun so far.
Fantastic. Is it because you're still watching the games? Do you have a clean feed, or are you watching the exact same feed that's going to the Twitch channel?
Yeah, so we get a clean feed. And actually starting tomorrow, we're gonna get a feed of only OBS one. So we will like then we won't have any replays. Which is
Oh, okay.
actually pretty nice for audio only. Because like when it goes in the replay, like the team fight sounds, happen again, and everyone in the audio is like, "What the hell's going on?" And we kind of have to say like, "They're on a replay right now," and kind of like clarify that. So like yet another funny thing that we figured out moving forward, like with the new broadcast medium that we kind of have to work around and solve.
Yeah, I know there's some of the questions they'll probably get re-asked in a second, but I'm just kind of curious and asking myself. You when you're normally casting, and I know every caster has a little bit of a different opinion on it, and especially as you're in different tiers within the esports scene, that'll change a little bit. But when you're doing most of your casting, do you have an eye on something like Twitch chat to get faster feedback on what's happening, or do you have everything turned off and you're just focused on solely the casting, no feedback?
Uh, the only time I've ever had Twitch chat open was for Tyler One stream, but
Okay.
that's very much because that is more of a stand-up routine than like actually casting.
Right. Well, the reason that I ask is because with this radio form, you're not getting any feedback at all until after everything is over, and you read through Twitter or read through production Discord channels of chatting with people and getting some feedback on it.
So we have this hashtag called like we do hashtag Lead Day Live. So if like people tweet at us or hop in our Discord and go to that channel and talk to us, you can. Like we read out a lot of those
Oh, okay, that's awesome.
on the air. That's about the only communication that we get from listeners. That and like we had a great group of people that tuned in the first week, including some people from here, like Dio was in, and some others that helped give us some nice feedback. The biggest thing for us at the moment is figuring out like what people, what information we're hitting on that people like want to hear, and like what information are we missing? Because ultimately, like with the audio only form, we're gonna be dropping a lot of info just because like we have to, right? And so like right now, like the biggest feedback we can get is like priority of information, like what a listener wants or needs to know. That's been like our biggest thing at the moment. That and then we have some other stuff we're doing, but yeah.
All right. Well, let's get this rolling now that it is a nice 8 o'clock time zone. If you who all are here hanging out, which is totally awesome, I'll drop a link in the general chat. That way, if you want to retweet it out, you can. But otherwise, we'll just continue right along. So, hello, Cubby. We have been friends for a good while, even before the casting stuff. But while I know a bunch about you, not everyone here necessarily does. So why don't we start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your life, a little bit about, what's going on.
Yeah. So hello everyone. I'm Matt Cubby Samuelson. Um, you guys can just call me Cubby. I've had that nickname for like way longer than esports. And it's served me well, especially now doing this venture. So I started playing League in season two and immediately was drawn to LCS and the competitive league. It was at an interesting point in my life where I love to be competitive and it was the final year that I was competing in golf, as I was not good enough to play at a D1 school and did not want to play at something that wasn't a D1 school. And so when golf stopped, I started competing in league, and I instantly hit Diamond 5 in season 3. And I've been Diamond 1 at a different role, or at every role except for top since then. And I peaked GM in season 10, and I was number 1 Brahmin. Along the way, I went to Miami University, Ohio, and I actually co-founded the first D1 varsity esports program there as my freshman year when I was putting a lot of time into league. It was not good. It was not a healthy thing for me. And I wanted to work on making ways that it, like, pursuing a game could be healthier for students. And so that's kind of how I got really involved in league. I coached that team, I played for that team. And a lot of those experiences just kind of led to me eventually being a caster. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for COVID, oddly enough. COVID, when I graduated, I was working a full-time marketing job, and COVID hit. And when COVID hit, that job went to part-time. I still help out there today. It's at giftgame.com. That's what I kind of do to daylight and support the casting thing. But yeah, I am here because of COVID. And once COVID hit, I couldn't find any jobs. And so I started applying for stuff I thought I could be good at. And one of those was casting. And I was casting around XLNC for fun at that time. Then I applied to Big League out on a whim, and they actually took me. And from there, I just kind of snowballed that into more and more and more. And now
Yeah,
here we are.
we'll get into some of those details in a second, but I did want to ask about that initial transition and that initial kind of, okay, I want to jump into doing casting, because most casters kind of have a moment or a particular cast that they listen to or they can pinpoint as being that kind of inspirational moment for, that's what really took me as, I want to do that. I want to be that. I want to be better than that. You know, everyone has a particular moment. I know for me, it was actually I'd listened to Rivington the Third cast a ton in the early days of the LCS, and I watched an interview with him on YouTube where he talked about getting into casting and what it meant for him to be as a caster. And that was my moment. That was just like, oh my gosh, I want this. I need this in my life. Was there a moment of that for you? And how did you kind of come to that decision that you're like, out of all the options, especially, you know, with COVID, you had all this time on your hands, and you decide esports casting, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, honestly, so like for me, this was something I've tossed around like while I was working in that full-time job. I remember I interviewed and got like an offer from eFuse back when they were first starting to be a marketer for them, and it wasn't enough, but I ended up like turning it down. And one of my mentors I had in the marketing world was like, you seem to be they kind of split between like wanting to go into gaming or like really pursuing marketing. And I kind of talked through the fact that, I thought that there are a few paths that could be successful in gaming. And now one of them was being a caster. Um, for me, this marries like, a few different interests. One, like being a player and a coach at one point. I have a knowledge base that I can draw upon doing color work that I think what I saw like a lot of other colors didn't have at the time. And of course, like, we'd sit in a room as a team, like in our arena at the university, and we'd be like watching the casters, and my players would be like, oh, like this guy like, doesn't know what he's talking about, or like I don't like this caster. Like there were like very few casters like we actually like respected, and I would kind of like look at them and say like, you know what, like if I put time into that, I think I could do better. And I didn't really realize that I really wanted to pursue this until I started getting to know like some of the community and the players and the coaches a bit more. And once I kind of started getting to know them and swapped up my casting style from being really, really heavy in game knowledge to more of that with a cross between that and storytelling and talking with players to kind of get those stories, that's when I really got interested in casting. Like I casting like early on with you, Jake, like you'd probably like remember like it was tough for me to like get energetic about stuff, like really excited. And once I got to know like everyone playing, like that's when it got easy for me to be excited, right? Because like then like I had personal stock in this because like I knew the guys competing, and I was like kind of rooting for them, like in a sense to all do their best. And that's what actually really pushed me ahead to be like, you know what, like I think I'm good enough to do this and I can pursue it. Also, my grandpa's like did radio for like 65 years and like in the Radio Hall of Fame. So that's also like a side motivation for me as well, kind of following his footsteps too.
That's awesome. Going from just radio, but now esports radio as well. That's super, super cool. Kind of a legacy carrying forward. And yeah, there's such a difference between just verbally repeating data that happens to be information regarding this particular game and having stakes that are invested into the players and the stories and the narratives, how these teams are performing, how these players are performing, and how that changes over something like a split or a tournament or a league.
Yeah.
Super, super cool stuff. Okay. So, first of all, for everyone here, welcome to all the audience members who are hanging out. If you're listening to this on YouTube, this is obviously going to be sometime in the future. Hopefully, you'll find this helpful and useful as it is esports casting getting started and how to stand out with Cubby. He's been in the industry for over a year now, which sounds very short, and it is short, but he's been able to find some incredible success with that. So that's actually going to be our next question. Don't worry, we'll get to questions from the audience after this. We only have 2 or 3 more to kind of set up where Cubby's at, where he's coming from, and the information. So go ahead and explain, because it literally was just over a year ago that you were coming into casting for the very first time. You're a community caster, casting for XLNC, just some small events. And in about a year's time, give or take a little bit, you're casting for the LCS radio show. Like that is huge. And this is the first time that the LCS radio is even a thing. So explain how that journey went and how you found those steps to go from community caster to that level, especially since there's so many casters that are constantly asking, how do I progress? Where do I go from here? How do I go from a nobody casting these small gold teams and games to something with the kind of success that you found?
Yeah.
The stories are going to be different, but just walk through your steps to get there.
Yeah. For me, like, I definitely like luck is always going to be involved, like for anyone. And I definitely got lucky a few times along the way. For example, right when COVID hit, Big League put out applications for their stuff. And because COVID hit, like one of the issues for me is like a lot of things took take place in LA, like for esports beforehand. With COVID, of course, everything went remote. So that's one, right? Another was for Big League. I used to cast the Miami games as the coach because like we couldn't find another student to cast. And I did one gig where we were playing up against Maryville, and I was in a WOM at that time, so I wasn't coaching anymore. But they asked me to like cast the game for them, and Returned hopped in, and I ended up casting with Returned, and then Returned was one of the people at Big League, and so like I only cast with him like once there, and when I put in my application and explained everything, like pretty much they wanted to pick 2 casters that like were already decent, and like 2 like they wanted to help develop, and I was like one of the ones they wanted to help develop, right? At this point for me, it's like just a hobby. I applied because like I didn't have a job, I had more time. It's like this might be fun, and they picked me over other casters that had more experience and were more qualified. Now I think that like my experiences as a playing like at a GM level and coaching a team definitely helps with color work. And that's always something that like you have to keep in mind as a color, that at any time, you know, someone like a Cadril can retire, and he is very well spoken, very smart about the game, has experiences that I will never have, and he can communicate those very well. That makes him a really attractive candidate for a cover caster too, right? So at least in the amateur scene, I think those experiences like definitely helped me. And it wasn't like I was starting like from scratch. Like even though I didn't do a lot of casting, like I felt that my game knowledge is good, and the thing that I've had to work on in the most in the past year is how I construct and present points and storylines. It's never really been like game knowledge. And for other colors, that's going to be different. Like I'll pick on Dia because I know Dia pretty well. His background's in theater. He's pretty good at presenting things and talking, right? But he needs to like be more familiar with League sometimes to take those extra steps, and he's done that since when I've known him. So that's good to see as well. So for everyone that's going to be different. For me, it was how I prepare and present points. And so I ended up popping in with Big League. From Big League, at that time, it was Scouting Grounds, right? And I felt like because of, my history as a coach and a player, I was qualified to work for Scouting Grounds. And so I proactively reached out to every single TO to get on their caster list. And then that was also the time that XT created the USB to cover a lot of the broadcasts that were going to be off stream. And so I hopped in there, and I did every and any gig in between. Like there was one point in there where I was on 17 days in a row, just 4 teams or different leagues because SGC like everyone had a day and it was just wild. Um, and so I kind of went from that to like never saying no to a gig to like then like after I did that, I did Cup Season 1, which is the most influential event for me because that's where I met TJ and Iberia. And those guys really helped me move along. Just being mentors and being people that had way more experience than I did. And if it wasn't for them, then I would be half the caster I am now. But it was pretty much like doing that and like just trying to like proactively ping TOs and no one said no to me because I don't know. I guess people like just thought I was okay or thought like liked working with me. And then from there just kind of trying. I think the biggest thing for me honestly was the fact that like I had really good practice partners. And I got really quick at like innovating what I thought was a good broadcast. And because I was like in the off season, like after Scotty Grounds took place, like I was practice casting 2 or 3 days a week with people that were more talented than me and learning from them a lot. Whereas I think a lot of other casters during that time like didn't really practice cast, and there were like some that I hopped in where it's like, oh, like hang with me, like this is my first cast in like 2 months, right? Which is cool, and I get a lot of people like have different priorities, but once I got to that point, like this is kind of like life or death for me. Like I have a certain amount of time to like do this and try and make it and try and live out my dream of being a full-time caster. And once I turned it into like being life or death, and I had 2 other part-time jobs to support that, all my free time goes into this. And so that
If
for
I could,
me like really pushed myself to be better and kind of innovate what I was doing. And once I got to that point, then that like I didn't have anyone cold reach out to me for a gig until like 2 months ago or 3 months ago. So a lot of it was just like being proactive and getting to the point where I felt like I was good and working on that process. And then yeah, like kind of like like once I felt like I was like to a level where like I'm decent. And like right now, like I'm an okay caster. Like there are things that I have to work on, but like I feel like I've gotten a lot stronger as a color and how I present points. But it took me a long time to like actually have someone like reach out to me for a gig. Besides that, it's a lot of hustling and messaging TOs, just being like, hey, I'm free. Like I'd like to cast your league. Like here's a reel of what I do. Would you consider me? Right. So a lot of that was like proactivity on my part and how I got started. And then from there, I guess I just got lucky enough where so far I've had good experiences working with me, and now I'm starting to get approached for stuff, which is cool.
yeah, I didn't want to interrupt, but I did want to kind of throw in and ask real quick because you talked about practice casting, and that's not something that a bunch of casters in the scene do, but you kind of, I don't know, need games to cast and need to find casters to duo cast with. So how did you go about making that practice cast be a thing? You know, where did you go to find games? How did you hit up other casters, and how did that process work for people that are like, oh, I'd love to practice cast, but I don't have anyone to practice with? You made that happen. So how does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of that for me was like talking with TJ, Esports TJ, who is I work with now for League Day. Um, and like early on with Cup, like I was doing Cup with TJ and Iberia, who I really look up to as casters and like the work they've done in the past. They have a lot of experience. And those 2 guys were awesome for me because like what a lot of people didn't know about Cup is that a lot of people thought like we got paid a lot for that gig. We did not. TJ did the World Finals for like Arena of Valor, which is a big mobile game for Tencent. And this guy's like 21. Like he was doing that gig at like 19. Like he's insane. And like he was taking like 1/10 of his rate for Cup just because he wanted to do like NA amateur and do it with Niberia, who he's like good friends with. But for Cup, like because COVID was going on, we would pretty much just like sit in calls 24/7 and like work on the show and like talk about broadcast theory. And a lot of practice casting for me is like just modeled off of like TJ because at that point, like I was smart about the game and I just kind of like talked about that, like doing a color. And then TJ, like we'd like hop in a call to like practice cast and he'd be like, all right, like what is your goal for this broadcast? And I'd just be like, what the fuck? It's like be smart and like that's it. And then he's like, no. He's like, what do you like want to convey or like present? Or like what are your goals? Like what do you think's good? Or like what do you think's bad? Like what do you want to be? And like all these questions like kind of really helped me model like what I wanted a broadcast that includes me to sound like and feel like and deliver a unique experience for anything that I'm a part of. Um, that is like what TJ really helped me with. And for practice casts, like if we practice cast, it's usually in 3 hours we get one game done, and the rest of it we talk about broadcast theory and like politics because he's super into politics, and that's just what we talk about. Um, but for practice cast, I mean, like if I was in your shoes, like listening or like early on, like I still do this today. Like if you know someone and like you like somewhat respect their casting work, like just ping them and be like, let's do a practice cast. Just pull up a watch together, pull up any VOD, and just cast over it and talk about what you liked and didn't like, and just try to like evolve from there. Um, and beforehand, talk about like things you want to work on, things that the other person wants to work on. Listen for those as you go and like give good feedback and just be honest about it, right? And that's what I've done with a lot of different like practice partners because that's also something where like I feel like practicing it's bad to practice with one person because like you will form bad habits. Practicing with multiple people, you just get more feedback, more like different approaches to casting, different perspectives, and like who thinks like what is good or what is bad. You can like kind of run with those, and help you formulate your like answers for those questions with like what you want your cast to sound like, what you think is good, and like what you want to convey, and like what kind of experience you want to like put out, right? So,
Being very intentional, which is
yeah, like being
awesome.
yeah.
Okay, but I
So
know we need to
yeah.
get to the questions. I know a bunch of people here hopefully brought some questions, but I do want to throw this out there because we are getting a little bit into this. Is before we jump into the questions, one of the things that you've done well that a lot of people would agree was that you were able to find a nice balance in being able to be yourself and build a brand in which people would recognize Cubby. They'd recognize Cubby's voice, they'd recognize how you dress, they'd recognize how you presented yourself, and the way that you carried your weight on social media built a very unique brand around your identity. And that's something that a lot of the amateur esports scene particularly struggles with is how do I stand out? There's such a, I mean, even in this Discord here, this production resources Discord, there's like over 100 casters for League of Legends. Well, that's a
Yeah.
highly saturated market. How do you stand out? How do you build a brand? How do you go about being unique in this scene?
Yeah. So like part of this, this is like somewhat of an advantage of me being a digital marketer, right? Is like I have Photoshop and Premiere skills and have used those like professionally and now like with my own brand as well. So that helps. And for anyone that wants to be a caster, I cannot emphasize enough that like you need to have some sort of content skills, whether that's video editing, whether that is some production work, whether that is like crappy Photoshops, whether that's Microsoft Paint. I don't know if anyone's seen Alorum's Twitter and what he's doing. I find it hilarious personally, but like you have to have like some skills to like make content because that is a part of this, right? Um, for me, I think once again like there's like a little bit of luck and recognizing a hole in the market. So one of the big problems that we had with scouting grounds and with proving grounds is that there's no central location for information. So I just kind of started being or trying to be that central location for information, and I really really tried hard. And I had people at the end of proving grounds last year saying that if I want to know what's going on with proving grounds, I just follow Cubby. And that was like my goal. Like that for me was definitely a goal for like what I wanted to accomplish like with being a professional in the space. And also like esports is a space and like your own brand is a space where you can really do whatever you want, like whatever you think is fun and entertaining and like content wise. And so like when I like build my brand, like ultimately, like I'm just like kind of being me and like being myself. And I found the sweet spot where I can be comfortable with like who I am and like what I do, but also like other people just seemingly like enjoy it, which it kind of blows my mind. Like I have people that like actually look at what I say and like click like or click follow. Like I don't really get it. Like, I don't think I do anything that special, but one thing that I am is I am consistent. Like, if there is a result in proving grounds, people think I'm the source of information. I will tweet within the next 5 minutes like what that result is. Um, and where in a space where only half the teams stream their games and TOs only tweet out, 2 or 3 times a day about a match, that is needed. And so I was really just able to like fill a niche, and I wanted to come off as a professional that helps build my ethos and like be an expert, as that is something that I think a lot of amateur covercasters struggle to do. As at any point, a Twitch chat viewer is just like looking to poke holes in your argument or looking for you to be wrong. Um, I know that on the Academy stream this past week, I called Lord Dominic's Regard Lord Dom's Revenge. That was a pretty shit mistake, and I got some flack for that. I'm pretty mad at myself for that, but ultimately,
Reddit,
like,
we
my
love
goal
you.
was like, yeah, like my goal was like to be like build myself in as a professional, and in a scene that for me lacked some of that professionalism, that ended up working out pretty well. That is the angle that I took and what I was comfortable with. And the biggest thing I can recommend for you is just find like the angle that you think that you can fill, or the hole that you can fill, and just do it well and be consistent about it. Because at any point, 3 months in, 6 months in, 9 months in, people are going to drop out and give up. And I've yet to do that. And I've been consistent with like what I produce. And because of that, I've been able to like kind of pick things up as we go. So that's been really helpful for me with kind of establishing myself.
That is so awesome, and there's so much good stuff there that I could ask a dozen more questions just off of that. But I think it's about time to give it over to the audience, and if you still have something that you want to share, just you personally towards the end, we'll take some time for that. So at this point, everyone that's on Discord, you should have an option towards the bottom in which you can raise your hand if you want to ask a particular question. So I guess it's a call of request. You can make a request to ask a specific question of Cubby. And so if you have questions, toss them in. We'll invite you up to where we're hanging out here and chatting away. And then once the question is done, if you have any follow up, we'll go with that. We have one from Midget Cow, so let's go ahead and get Midget Cow in here. So
Yeah.
I've invited you to come up here and chat with us, Midget Cow, and you have to accept. There you go. Hello and welcome, Midget Cow.
All right. Hello. Thank you for having me. So quick question for you, Cubby. One of the things you mentioned was the co-caster that you worked on doing your practice casts with took a massive rate cut to work with Cup with you. How do you go about identifying what rate you feel that you should be working at and what rate the different levels you are approaching is as you're breaking into the early, mid, and higher tiers of casting?
Yeah. First off, can I like have your name or like a little bit about you? Because we just
Oh yeah,
haven't met.
sure.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. I'm Jacob Poppenfeld, also known as the Midget Cow. I come from a background in I played for Limited Method in World of Warcraft. Played for 2 years competitively before going over to finishing up a degree in college.
Oh yeah.
Currently a student over at Stockton University, graduating this fall. And I've been helping to run the esports program for the past 2.5 years. And on the back end of it, through the pandemic, I transitioned from just working with my program to moving into freelance casting. And I do color.
Very cool. Well, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out, asking a question. And that is a great question. So I've had a lot of help with this because, funny story, and this is somewhat luck, but about 2 months into casting, I got reached out to by Papa Smithy to pitch him a project of what it would take to start up a broadcast for his 100 Thieves Next team. I knew nothing about casting rates at this point, so I had to ask around and get some research. And I'm actually going to link in general the screenshot from what I got from that page that I pitched to Papa Smithy. And these rates are from an ESL producer, Averum, who at the time he was working on this video and then he put it out. So this is about where rates land. Also being transparent and frank with you guys, the rate for Academy is $750 a day, and that is for either 4 or 6 best of ones, depending on if you're on the Academy stream or the NSG stream. Ultimately, though, like you have to find a point as a caster that you feel like you are comfortable like asking for, right? So like for example, like Risen, right? Risen just came out. There are some great people working on Risen. Their rates at a point where that's too low for me to accept and feel good about now, right? Um, Also, like, the rate that I establish, when you're casting, like, you are in charge of arguing for yourself, right? Like, all of us, we are pretty much our own agents. And so pretty much like the academy rate's 750, and I work academy and do LCS audio only, and I kind of base my rate off that and like what the opportunity is, and if I feel comfortable like accepting what they have to go for it, right? Um, so like I've taken less than that, I've taken more than that. It just kind of depends on what the gig is and how many hours it is. The biggest things I can recommend for you guys is uh, phrase it as day rates and half day rates. So if a day rate is 750, that means it's usually two best of threes, a best of five games in advance. Like they're even if it's just three games, they're paying you to be free for the best of five and to prep for a best of five, right? So most of the industry standard stuff is in day rates and half day rates. So I would just recommend phrasing it in that, and then just find a point that you feel like a price that you feel like you are comfortable quoting that fits the opportunity. Um, like if it is a team stream for one of the Proving Grounds teams and they're paying you $50 to cast a best of three, honestly, that's not too bad for that opportunity, considering that it's going to be for lower viewers because it's not on the main broadcast. And also, it's going to be good experience for you casting a higher level game. And it's not below minimum wage, right? So I would just kind of like recommend like having those numbers in mind, like to base yourself off of, and then just trying to quote something that you feel comfortable with, and also doesn't undercut people around you. Because if you don't get a gig, that's okay. But if a gig's paying 200, you don't want to go say like I'll do it for $20, right? Because then ultimately like other casters will frown upon you for that, and also, um, you want to get paid a reasonable rate for the work that you do. If you are casting, this is a field that takes some skill, some talent to do. You shouldn't be getting paid like below minimum wage for bigger gigs, right?
I'm
So
actually
just
going
kind of
to
keep all
jump in
those
here
things
real
in
quick
mind.
and ask, what do you consider a bigger gig, though? Because oftentimes in the amateur scene, especially casters that are just starting out, that are casting for the really small leagues, BOL, XLNC, Focus, these orgs are kind of they're not tier 2, they're not tier 1, but they all it's clearly not their academy, but they do pay some depending on the league and
Yeah.
what it is. So what do you see as being a quote unquote big gig? What would you put into that folder / category?
For me, when I was doing this a year ago, it was anything that involved the Proving Ground circuit, and any of like the broadcasts on those, or the like most competitive league for any of those TOs. So like Upsurge or Risen or like I guess for that would be heavyweight now, right, Jake?
Heavy is diamond. Above that is pinnacle, which is our
Pinnacle. Yeah,
master to grandmaster / uncapped.
got it. So like the uncapped leagues, right? Because ultimately, like I remember like saying this like earlier in XLNC, right? The fact that like if Tyler won one of the stream gold games and had me cast it, like I would ask for the same like rate because like of the exposure. But the more competitive the games are, the more likely that people are going to tune in to watch competitive games, and the better opportunity it is for you as a caster. So that's what I would kind of consider the bigger gigs. And they do not pay close to the academy rate, but they will pay more than $50 a cast, right? So you just kind of have to figure out how to navigate that, and also talk to your friends about this and like what they're getting paid, and be transparent about it, right? That like we can help each other out with this as casters. That's very important to be like pretty transparent about. So that's why I'm kind of trying to do that here. So yeah.
All right, thank you very much. That was a pretty inclusive answer.
Yeah.
The only addendum I wanted to add on after that is, what about the lower than that? So basically, step between your $50 for a best of three of, let's say, Upsurge, Summer Split games versus like um, doing, let's say, grand finals for some of the tier one leagues and things like that.
Um, I've never charged more or gotten paid more to be on finals. or like playoffs or anything like that. The only time that would change if it went from a best of 3 to a best of 5 or something like that. And then like, it goes from a half day to a full day rate. But usually like it's pretty consistent for those leagues, like what you show up for on the day. The in-betweens, like, do you mean like lower leagues for like Upsurge or United, I should say, as they rebranded?
Unified.
Yeah.
Unified, thank you. Honestly, that's just like whatever you want to do and like whatever you are comfortable with, right? If you want to cover UCL, you feel like you're going to get a lot of airtime, you're working with people you think are talented, and you think that you can use it to grow as a caster and improve and, look good doing that, then, and it's not a great rate, but you like want to put the time into it, then sure. I mean, like there's nothing that says that you can't take a gig like that. But ultimately, like I would look at every opportunity as like, I'm going to do this and I want to look good. I'm going to put the time to look good. So like one example is like when I like a year ago, I do a lot of team streams because I like at the time there were good opportunities for me. Now I don't. And it's not because I don't like want to take that rate. That's a part of it. But the biggest reason is because if I did a team stream, I wouldn't look as good because I wouldn't be able to like be as prepared for it. And I would rather use that time to prepare for a bigger gig or to practice with someone and like actually like really work on things instead of like really like trying to improve or like just trying to like be as good as I can be like on that day, right? And so like once again, like you are on your own in this industry, you can make a lot of friends, but ultimately like you are the boss man, right? And if you want to take that gig and do it and you feel like you can do it well, go for it. If not, and you don't feel like it's worth your time, then you get to say no, and that's perfectly fine, right? So it's really like in your hands what you want to do.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answers.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming out and listening. I hope I was able to help.
And to toss in real quick, what Cubby was saying about the difference between the best of 3 and the best of 5 kind of echoes a point that you'll get through in a lot of the kind of higher end of the industry, which is it's not about necessarily the size of the gig or the size of the audience. It's about time. How much time are you investing? If you're investing a whole bunch of time, charge more. If you're investing a smaller amount of time, maybe charge less. So your rate compares to your time. We do have a couple of people. We've got Camcom, put your hand down. So I guess your question might have gotten already answered already. We got Flash of Night. And I'm going to butcher this name. I see it every time and I've heard it 1,000 times. Nimera? Nimera? I always say it wrong. The next one that I think was in line after Camcom is Mongoose. So we'll go ahead and invite Mongoose up here to ask their question. We'll try to get through it. We got 30 minutes to go, so we got some time. Mongoose, welcome.
Hello.
Hello again.
Hi again, Cubby. I have come back with more questions.
All right. What do you got?
So I have 3 questions, but it's all kind of about the same topic. So I can just rattle them off if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
So it's all about practice casts, and if practice casting is better when you do it with another play-by-play, and then if going over VODs is better if you do it with another like color, if you're a color, for instance. So would practice cast be more beneficial with a play-by-play? I assume it would. And then would VODs be more beneficial if you have a play-by-play so you can have the other side, or a color so that you can kind of bounce back and forth between kind of broadcasting ideas? The next question would be, should you go into a practice cast with only one goal, or should you go into it with multiple goals? That way you can focus on something, or if you have multiple things you need to focus on, you can do that at the same time, or if it's more beneficial to break it up over multiple practice days. And the last one is, should you do practice casts straight through and then go back over them later, or is it beneficial to take breaks if something is too egregious?
I'll start with the last two actually. I personally, it depends on like some days I walk in with one goal, some days I walk in like I didn't cast this like in 5 days. I just like want to see what happens and like get back into it. Other days I walk in and I say I'm working on these 2 or 3 things. It's just like once again, like you as an individual and as a professional, like you probably have an idea of like what you need to work on or what you want to work on. And I like keeping things a little bit more focused. And so I would recommend keeping that. Like I never have more than 2 or 3 things I'm trying to work on in a cast, right? And usually with practice casts, like I'm looking to that might change from game 1 to game 2. That might grow from game 1 to game 2, or like as we go on. It just kind of depends. Um, as for who you practice cast with, I'm a color. I've only done 1 gig ever paid as a play-by-play because the producer made a scheduling error, which will happen if you get bigger gigs. So be prepared to flex if you have to. Um, I practice with anyone and everyone. I've done it with colors where we do 2 games and we swap roles. I actually really like doing that because I learn a lot sitting in the other seat and learn what's good or bad. I think it forces a play-by-play to pick up game knowledge, which is imperative to like for play-by-play, right? Like you as a play-by-play are focusing on what you feel like is most important in the fight or in whatever you are going over, and that requires a lot of game knowledge to be right about, right? Um, like switching seats. I think that it actually like I do it a lot in practice casts, especially like working with other colors. But I've even done it with like play-by-plays. Me and Mad Magical, like when we practice, we would swap seats every single time we practice. We really liked it. It was just fun to like kind of throw yourself off, get yourself uncomfortable, and try and work on things from there. Um, for the first one, were you talking about like who to do it with, or like partners, or like?
I guess if it's like more beneficial, you kind of already answered it for the practice cast, but I guess going over VODs, if you're just watching yourself cast and like trying to find mistakes, if it's more beneficial to do it with a play-by-play or a color, depending on
I
what you are.
Yeah. It depends. I think that just do it with anyone that you respect. Whether that's a peer, whether that's someone that you know that might have like done more casting, or if it's someone that's done less casting. I've learned a lot from doing VOD reviews of other people's casts. I've learned a lot by getting my shit pushed in VOD reviews with other casters where I sucked. And they just like let me have it, right? I think the important thing is just like whoever you're doing with, like build up some trust, build up the fact that you guys are going to be honest about feedback. And if you do a practice session with a caster and like, it goes great, do more. If it doesn't, that's fine. Like you can always find other practice partners. I think the key is like just get in reps and start building a system where you feel like you're improving. Because like at the end of the day, like none of the branding or marketing or like any of that stuff really matters if like you just go up and suck on a cast, right? Like I still like to believe that like there is a lot of skill behind this. And I think the important thing is like, especially at this point, like start building a process to improve. And if you are good, you will get recognized, right? That's at least that's how I like to believe things go. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Mongoose. Appreciate it. And of course, if you have other questions you think about as we progress, definitely feel free to raise that hand again, and we'll get you back in. So appreciate you all coming out. We got Flash of Night coming in next. Welcome. I think you and I have only chatted just a brief little bit through DMs. But hello, Flash of Night. Introduce yourself, and let's hear a question for Cubby.
Yeah, my name is Ben Flashlight Art. I'm currently a senior in high school at the moment.
Oh, nice.
And I started like casting kind of like as a hobby in November, so I've been doing it for a little bit. But my questions mostly are around like the application process to orgs, and mainly about like a casting, like a reel, which like hear a lot about, but I haven't spent the time to create one. So my question is like, should I create one, and what should I put in it? And then like what other things should I look to include on my application?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this varies from play-by-play to color. I think that for color, like your reel is ultimately like whatever you want to convey to a producer in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And I would very much picture it as that. So like some things that I might want to include in my reel are, hey, I've worked on LCS audio only, and I've worked on Academy, and I also have a podcast where I talk to players, and I also like coached in Peak GM and was #1 Brahmin A, right? Because like even though like that's not specifically cover casting, that does add value to like who I am and builds ethos or builds credibility for what I do. Whereas for a play-by-play, I think it's important to include like, hey, here are some of the things I've done, but also like you want to include a couple team fight calls because, like, holy shit, it's Mad Magical popping off and is real, right? Like, no one's not gonna like to hear a fight called by Mad Magical. So given the fact that you're a color, I would just try and find a few things that like you feel like you can demonstrate your knowledge of the game or what approach you're trying to take to cast. And like a few clips of stuff you've done from maybe core projects that you've worked on that you include, or a few clips where you just thought like, hey, I sounded damn good in this. And like, I want this to, go to any producer that I have that talks to me. And here it is. Something else that I do actually quite a bit is I will include my reel. I will also include the most recent cast that I was on every once in a while, as I think that is also just nice. Like, hey, like here's my reel, but also like you guys are gonna have me casting Game of League. Here's the most recent cast I did, and hopefully it's good, right? And it keeps you honest by kind of sending the most recent one, which I do that on purpose because like A, it's my most recent work, but B, I always like keep in mind like, hey, my most recent work is what I'm gonna send anyone if they ask. So like it's got to be damn good, right? So yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That helps a lot. Yeah.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much, Flash of Night. Appreciate it. Rolling right along. And again, if you have any other questions, raise that hand again. We'll get you back in here. So, Nimera, or Nymera, is that creative freedom. So I got to do what I wanted to it. So, Nymera,
Yeah,
welcome.
that's the
Welcome.
one.
How you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Hey, I'm Alex Namera. I am not from your land. I am from the UK. I've been casting for a year and a half at this point. I do a fan
Cool.
broadcast at the LJL. I've been casting in the UK scene. Done some
Oh, you're on the
university
OGL?
stuff. Fan broadcast. But,
Got it. So you would know Joshi
yes.
then, probably.
Yeah, he was on our finals broadcast actually.
Yep.
He's a really cool guy. I'm a big fan.
Josh is a nice
He's,
guy. He's a big fan of the
yeah,
LGL. Yeah.
And he's super talented too, so he's really good for us. So this is going to be less of an industry one, a bit more of a hardcore on the mechanics of casting, because I've been interviewing a lot of casters recently, and a lot of color casters suffer from only talking about the game and being quite dry, and it kind of keys into what you were talking about, forging a personality and kind of weaponizing your own image to become unique in the industry.
Mhm.
So for me, I have my own ways of doing this, but I'm really interested on your take on this and how you improve your analytical points to actually seem interesting, and how do you space in between them just odd jokes and different parts of your casting and downtime to make the points you do make seem more important.
Yeah. So there are a few different ways to do this. And it kind of
That's why I'm
depends
interested
on
in yours.
yeah, that kind of depends on like what you want to go for and like what your approach is. For me, if you check my Twitter bio, it says the NA storyteller or storyteller of NA League of Legends, right? And this was a big hole in the market for amateur casts, was that no one was telling stories. Everyone was just like talking about the game. And that is my biggest strength as a broadcaster, I feel like, is my game knowledge. My game knowledge has only gotten worse since I started casting because like I don't play League
Same.
anymore. Like I only
Same.
put time into like this. And I shifted completely to talking about like stories. And so the way that I do that is before a match, I usually send over a couple questions to the coach, manager, or player that I want to talk to, or a story that I want to push. And if they answer, I reference it on broadcasts. I'm very polite about it. I say like, hey, I'm on your game. If you have time, answer these. If not, it's not a part of your job.
Do you
Thank
have
you
a
for
way
your
that
time in
you
advance.
decide on that direction? Because so for instance, I know that Opal did a lot of the PCS stuff last year, has a certain like kind of like builds up their narratives in terms of like smaller player narratives, then teams, and then
Mhm.
like the parts of the league, and then global. Do you have like do you have a way that you organize your own ones, or is it just whatever comes to you in your inspiration?
Usually that's set by what I see going over their games. So I'll pull an example of what I did one for Proving Grounds, which was
Right.
probably my strongest point I've made on broadcast, where I had this narrative going in that Noorg had a blue side kingdom, is what I called it. Because Noorg, going into Proving Grounds, and this is like a fun thing that we could do, because like we had 70 plus games of stats to go off of, which never happens in the
Right.
LCS.
Yeah.
But in the 70 plus games, I think it was 74, they played 55 of those games on blue side, and they had an over 80% win rate on blue side. And I formulated this narrative that, like, the way they played was through Viper Anda, and pretty much they they would mess with the top side of the map on the third wave every single time. Like every single game they played. Like they were picking Elise, they were picking Talia. They didn't play a single game of Hecarim in this like last split because you can't screw with the top side as Hecarim early. Their entire game plan was like screwing with the top side, which is easier to do on the blue side of the rift because of the tri-brush placement, and it's easier to get access to diving top. Also, Fire was playing blind mids that would just get free shove like Zoe, TF, and Set. And he had crazy win rates on them. And Value would just play weak side on bot, like with Senna, Ezreal. And I had all these stats pulled for that broadcast that I would just reference throughout when talking about Norg's blue side. And the reason I was so happy with it was because when I interviewed Value, he mentioned Norg blue side kingdom on his own. And I got this like big ass smile on my face, and I was like, "No way!" He's like, "Yeah, man." He's like, "You called it." It's like we just picked blue side like every single time and played towards it, and like that for me was like one of the cooler things I've been able to do, and like kind of how I fill the game time I took something that was objective in the game, but turn it into a story as this is a choice that the team is making and the strategy they're going for, and then here are some stats to back that throughout their season because stats were more valuable for us since. They had 70 games, and also that production didn't push any stats to broadcast. Yeah, so like I kind of had to provide them all. So that took a lot of prep to pull off. I pinged Tim from Oracle's Elixir to help me with it because he had like more access to data than I did. Like that's an example of like a cool narrative that I was able to paint using something that was objective in the game, but also did storytelling for the team. And I said that every king has a kingdom, and Norg's kingdom is blue side because they were the best team in amateur. And yeah, I pitched that like in the Riot meeting, and the feedback I got from that was like, we didn't hear anyone else that like was as prepared on the teams as you. And so like it took a lot of prep for me to pull off. Like that was one of the better like narratives I've had. Like that is an example of like how you can fill using more than just game time. And that doesn't focus on me. And that's something that is like I try and do is because I like to tell stories about other people in the league. I actually try and pull myself out of that equation. So like a lot of like the personality injections that I have aren't really about me, or if they are, they're quick and I try and get off of it and like back into the game. Because I think there are a lot of like different approaches to the broadcast. I don't think I need to be a part of it, and I would rather seed myself out of it and tell the stories of everyone else. I feel like by doing that, it's a strength for me. That's not what like I know other casters that think the exact opposite. And they're very talented as well.
I've had a lot of discussions about it. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it seems like you've put some thought into this by like how direct your question was. But I appreciate it. It's a good question, and it's one that you have a lot of creative freedom in casting, and that's definitely one where answering the question like what is a good broadcast for you, thinking about how you inject yourself and your personality into that broadcast is definitely a part of that equation in answering that question. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
No, yeah, thanks for the question. That was really good.
And before we jump to Chaotic, I know you've been hanging around for a while, so I appreciate it. Thank you for your patience. I want to throw a follow-up, Cubby, on that one, which is, so you're talking about when you had this narrative that you pulled from watching all these previous games, and it was a great example of basically how you got it right. But sometimes, especially in the amateur scene and for color casters, but sometimes even a little bit play-by-play, you're not given as much information, especially if it's a one-off, and so sometimes you kind of have to, as sort of a little bit how you did, guess at what those narratives are. Have you ever gotten it wrong? And if you have, how do you respond to you're building this narrative and then maybe a player or a coach says something to you behind the scenes that, oh, that's completely wrong, or maybe in an interview afterwards you learned that you were reading the data wrong and your narrative wasn't at all what was actually lining up with their actual playstyle?
Every once in a while, like I can have like disagreements about like what I see, or like honestly the biggest one that I have with this is I am one of the contributors to the top 10 prospects lists for Mobilytics for Proving Grounds, and I oftentimes get a lot of people that disagree with me on my thoughts and opinions on that. Ultimately, I think it's healthy to have a discussion, but sometimes there are things that you can disagree with. And also part of the reason that like before I go into a match, I always try and talk to each team is to make sure that I'm not too far off, because by getting as close to the source as possible, I'm able to provide the most accurate information. That's like kind of for me, it's like that's journalism, and a lot of this, like, and a lot of what I do in my approach actually does involve a lot of skills from journalism. When I've been off, there's probably been like a few like times that I've been off, especially covering more of like the academy or LCS stuff because I don't have as many sources there or people that I know like get back to me. But I've like never had to like backtrack anything, and a lot of that is just because like I put a lot of prep into a cast that I do, and I try to make sure it's right. The only time I had to do it is I had Fallen Bandit item being X Hunter Thieves and not X CLG, and like that's just a dumbass mistake. Like I had to backtrack on air. That was a fun DM I got from Hunter Thieves on that one, but that's like the only one I can remember, and like it feels shitty, but I try and push those out of my mind and like just build a process to like prevent those from happening again. So yeah,
So mostly
like you're gonna make mistakes, but like you can always bounce back from those mistakes, right? You just kind of have to take it on the chin and try to figure out like where it went wrong and like what it fixed. And for example, like for that one, now for every single match I have in my notebook, I list all the players and the X teams that they've been on and the years and the splits. So if I ever want to reference something like that, I can just look down in my notebook and I have it in front of me. So like that's one way that like I screwed up and I took it on the chin. I apologize, but like then I built a process to make sure like that wouldn't happen again.
learning and improving. Also, take note, a notebook sitting in front of you on your desk that has information, easy access to grab is very helpful. If you follow any of the procasters or those that are aiming to be procasters, you'll see on their Twitters pictures of their full notebooks with 1,000 notes and helpful information. And shorthand to make it really easy for them to translate what it is that they wrote into a lot of content to talk about on broadcast. Welcome, Yanni. I know there's a couple of the new people here as well, so I just want to say very quickly, we are getting a little bit closer to the end of the hour that Cubby gave us tonight. We're going to try to get Chaotic in here. If you have any questions, we'll try to squeeze you in at the very end. But I appreciate you guys all coming out and hanging out. Did you want to throw something else in there, Cubby, about the notebook?
Yeah, so I have a notebook for myself personally. But other duos I work with, we have different systems, and I just dropped in general, me and TJ, the system that we use. We have a few things that are wrong in there, but that's because the system, we have a page where we copy and paste the teams in, and then we write the matchup. So most of the stuff in the middle should be correct. But that's the system that we use for audio-only LCS. That's like with OneNote. You just got to find something that like works for you. Like there's no right answer here. I like the notebook because I remember things better when I write it down, and when I'm on camera, it's better to look down instead of look to my second monitor, in my opinion. But audio only, we're not on camera, so this is on my second monitor.
Hey, there you go. Multiple monitors helps that. And if you are watching this on YouTube at a later time, we are on the Discord is where he's sharing some of that more specific stuff. But the general idea is taking notes, talking with your co-casters, all that good stuff. Chaotic Clockwork, we're going to go ahead and invite in to share their question with Cubby. Welcome, Chaotic Clockwork. If you want to introduce yourself briefly and then jump in with your question.
Hi, my name is Ethan. You can call me Chaotic or Clockwork, whatever is easiest for you.
You have a bear. I'm a big fan of that.
Why, thank you. I stole it off the internet somewhere, and I wish I could find the artist to credit it.
Hell yeah. All right.
So I had a question for you, because you said you peaked GM and you were the best Brahmin in North America, right?
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. When you were casting and like outputting a lot of information, did you feel like your information was taken differently because of your rank or because you were a higher rank, or do you think you presented it better? Because I know there's a large stigma in a lot of esports communities, especially in League of Legends, where people will take your information, instead of taking it at face value, they'll look at your rank first and then decide how much they agree with you. Do you feel like that was a big thing when you were starting out?
That's a great question. Starting out, it can only help you, right? Like you do not need to be high rank at this game to have a good understanding of it, right? Papa Smithy was gold, Frostgaren like peaked plat, Bonnie Cristo was silver, Peter Dunn is iron 3. They're all some of the smartest people about the game and with coaching that like are in the scene, right? But it can only help you, in having those experiences. They did help me. Like back then, I could break down like how every single bot lane matchup went and kind of describe like whose spikes were where. And I can still kind of roughly do that now, but not as in depth as I was able to back when I played consistently. Now, the biggest point for you is sometimes, and I was asked earlier about Twitch chat and having that up. I never have Twitch chat up. The only time I did was for Tyler 1 because like that's a stand-up routine, quite frankly. Like I'm just making jokes. For the double lift one, I had a Chipotle trash bag, and every single time his team lost because it was C9's core, I put more of C9's merch in the trash bag. Like that's not cover casting. Like that's entertaining, right? Twitch chat, I never really take Twitch chat at face value if I go back and review one of my casts, but sometimes there's a reason that they're saying what they're saying, right? So like if they go and they look up your rank and say like, oh, this guy's like gold 4, like don't trust what he say. Well, maybe they're wrong about that. And like that is wrong, right? Because like you can be XY rank and still have a really good point about the game. But maybe there was a game knowledge thing that got messed up earlier that kind of caused them to like go look for your rank, or like they just like wanted to pick on you, right? Which sometimes people in Twitch chat are assholes and they do. But overall, like, yeah, it helped me build ethos. But like if you make a good game knowledge point, like I'm not gonna go look up your rank and be like, oh, like this guy's silver, so like it doesn't matter, right? Like I have my own thoughts and opinions about the game. I know if your points are gonna be good or bad or like why. And the key is just like making sure like that info is right and like you're on the right track. I think that my rank and my previous experience definitely helps me a lot. But it's not what it helped early on, but like it's not the reason like I have credibility now. So yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for answering. I don't think I have any follow-up questions.
No, thanks for your time, man. Hope I've been able to answer some good questions here.
Awesome. I know that we're very close on time, but I am going to squeeze in a question add by Gaiku from the chat earlier in general, which is, when you're starting out, how do you make sure that you're improving as a caster? Most importantly, that when you're starting to cast for an org, you want to make a really good impression. And then also, if you're casting for them regularly, that you're showcasing that you're improving and getting better. So outside of, you can practice all day and night and, pray to the high heavens that there's improvement there that you can find and continue to push. But how do you go about knowing that you are finding good practicing and you're using good tools to make sure that you are improving as a caster?
Honestly, that's like one where like you kind of have to answer that on your own, like as a caster, right? Like kind of going back to the point where we're all casting's cool because like we're all in this together, but ultimately like we're all in charge of our own success. And like if there are things like as a caster that like if you have got sort of answer those questions, like what do I want a broadcast that I'm in to sound like? What do I think makes a good broadcast? What do I want to bring to the table that's unique? After that, like you can kind of, if you have solid answers for those, you can kind of use those to answer like how well you're doing or if you're improving a lot. And the way that, I talked earlier about like first impressions, about like why like I wasn't doing team streams anymore. Well, it's because like whenever I cast, I want to be at my best, right? And for me, being at my best and putting my best foot forward, for me, that involves a lot of prep. If I'm on Academy or LCS, I will have watched every single game in that league and have notes on every single one of them. And I will have talked to players and I will have stats drawn that I can reference during the broadcast. And I do 2 to 3 hours of prep work for things that may only take up 2 or 3 minutes of airtime. And for me, that's where, like, if you want to leave a good impression, like, go in, be prepared, be smart, be nice and courteous to everyone that you work with. That's a big note that a lot of people overlook. People don't want to work with people that are assholes. Like, that's just a general thing. And so, like, I just kind of hold it as, like, if you're trying to make a first impression, always put your best foot forward. And if it works out, great. If not, ask them why it didn't, and then kind of use that feedback to try and move on and get better from there. So, yeah.
Sweet. It is a 9 o'clock. That was the hour that you gave us. But if you are okay with that, can we squeeze one last question
absolutely.
from Camcom in? Okay.
Yeah, what's up, Camcom?
Let's go ahead and invite Camcom in.
I am going to eat a cough drop, though. So
that is quite all right. You cast a lot, and you've been pretty busy. So welcome,
Camcom.
Last
week was... I do not recommend doing what I did last week, but it was fun. Anyway, what's up, Camcom?
Hi. Was I supposed to give like an introduction thing, or?
Yeah, you can give a short introduction about who you are.
I would love introductions. Then we can all get to know each other in here.
Okay. Hello. I am currently junior. Well, I guess there's today was the last day of school, so I guess I'm technically a senior now in high school.
Congrats.
Thank you. I have recently been casting XLNC Mid League. I work on Cloud9 Training Grounds, and I'm currently doing CB Lowell English as well. I'm a play-by-play caster.
Nice. That's awesome.
I just wanted to ask, how do you like to frame interviews and like interview questions, particularly to players like after they win a game, but it's like mid-series, so it's like they won game 2 of a best of 5. Like, how would you like frame a question or like an interview segment for them for the upcoming games?
That's really weird. I've never talked to a player in between game 2 and game 3 or like a best of 5. That said, my one pet peeve for interviews is just don't start off an interview with how are you feeling after that win, right? It's everyone asks that question and the player's going to say the same thing every single time. I think the biggest tip that I have for interviews, or that I like, something that Lore does a lot in the LEC, is she will explain what she wants to ask, but then she will just ask, how do you feel about that? Like, what are your feelings on that, right? So, like, let's say after today she asked Treats about the lane swap to jungle. Like, so you are now jungling for SK. How are you feeling about that? Like, how are you melding with the team, right? And kind of leaving things more open-ended and asking them to expand on a topic, you will get more honest answers and give them more space to give those honest answers at the end. I'm not the best interviewer in the world. I did it for top 32 and 16 to C-Law. I did my best, but that's like what I like. But I would just say, like, look at interviewers that you like, kind of think about the questions they're asking, and just give the players a platform to like really speak and build themselves, right? If you give them space, that's what makes a good interviewer, right? Is like getting good questions out of the players. So just kind of like find a way to open up the floor for them and make them feel comfortable about whatever they want to share.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out. I like hearing people like starting this off in high school. That's crazy. I wish I would have done that. I started when I was like 24.
Imagine how far you could have grown if you started in high school.
I know.
And
have
built
you
from
seen
there.
Sully, that like Valorant caster that's like 17? That guy is killing.
This is insane.
And he's 17.
Talking about the next generation of casters, right? I'm
He
30
is
years old,
killing.
such a boomer at this point in the industry, and it's really amazing to see the new stuff coming up. So, all right, well, we are at the end of our questions and kind of towards the end of the segment, but I just wanted to throw it out there as we've got obviously still some people hanging out here, but this is going to be ending up on YouTube. So for people that may be listening to this 4 months or 6 months or even a year down the road that are looking for how to get started in esports casting, do you have any last general advice that you want to give to kind of support people and start them off on the right foot when it comes to breaking into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the fact that you guys are taking time out of a Friday night to sit and listen to what I have to say, A, is flattering, but B, it shows that you're passionate enough to, care about what I might have to say, and hopefully I was able to help and make that time well spent. I am not a professional. I'm getting close, but I think that the important part about this is the fact that a lot of casting is sharing ideas and having open conversations. And I know if it wasn't for me talking with people like TJ or Niberia, or working with orgs like 100 Thieves, I would not be half the caster I am today without those experiences. And I think that casting is something that, like I said, ultimately it's on you to be successful, and you are on your own. But you can also, like, everyone can kind of help each other along the way, right? And so that's hopefully what, hopefully you guys have been able to pick up a few things. And besides that, if you see something and you want to do it, like, just do it. It is a big time investment, but ultimately, like, OBS is free. It is free to post things on YouTube. It is free to make content on Twitch. And I think that a lot of my success has just been the fact that I am consistent about doing that. And I mean, I am the only cover caster that has a podcast and a show that I produce and kind of like started up on my own with a little bit of help from some friends. But like it is on you to kind of be a self-starter and to kind of get after it. And so, like, if you want to do VOD reviews, do them. Like, more people will start to tune in the more like you start to do this, right? And be consistent. Ninja was live for 16 hours a day for months before he started to pop off with Fortnite, right? He grinded it out and got a lot better, and that's kind of the case with anyone doing this. And so I just encourage you, like, if you want to, you don't go after it. It's something where hard work, I really feel like it does pay off, and the hard workers always get rewarded in the end. And don't get discouraged if things don't go your way at the start. Just kind of use it to motivate you to keep on going and work harder. So, yeah.
Don't get discouraged. Stick with it. Build connections and networking. Sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Cubby, for taking the time to come out here and chat with all of us. Awesome people in the aspiring casters that are just looking to get their foot in the door. So really appreciate it. And it's been an honor. I've known you for a while, and I'm just blown away by watching your success. And I cheer you on every time I get the opportunity. You're just super awesome. So if you have not heard of Cubby before, where are you? What are you doing? Why are you living under a rock? Follow this guy on Twitter at CubbyXX, CUBBYXX. You will not be disappointed. He's got some of the best information in the, I would say amateur, but you're going all the way up to the LCS tier now. So I would just say League of Legends information that you could.
We're not
for.
officially LCS. We are audio only broadcast.
Yeah, it's kind of side. It's kind of
I don't want to take
cousin.
away from the LCS talent and the amazing work that they do, but it's cool to be covering all 3 leagues right now in NA, and it's gonna be a busy summer, but one I'm looking forward to, and I'm glad that you guys came out. Hopefully I was able to help. And now you guys know me, so please add me. And if you have any questions or anything like that, like if you DM me, I will get back to you. So it's an open line of communication now for you guys too. So yeah, hopefully this was able to help, and yeah, I hope that this gets you thinking on kind of what you want to do as a broadcaster, and hopefully helps you guys, kind of think out some more questions and all that good stuff. So yeah.
Sounds good. And if you're interested in getting involved with XLNC and what we do here for you that might be watching on YouTube or Twitter VOD or Twitch VOD at some point in the future, you can now use discord.gg/XLNC to join the Discord, get in contact with us, and maybe we can help find you your first couple of paid gigs. So a lot of awesome stuff there. But thank you all for coming out. Thank you to all the people coming in with the audience, with the questions. It's so awesome. It's being able to